Hi and welcome to another in a series of short films where I demonstrate how I put together various songs from my latest album Lifestory, which was released recently. The track that I want to do now is called Signals, which was the first song that I attempted for the album. This was in the middle of 2013. What I started to do with this album was I wanted to try and use some of my older keyboards. I've got about 25 different keyboards and synthesizers and I wanted to use some of the older ones and some of the more old school things just to mix things up a little bit and give some new sounds. When I say new, I mean old. I have an old Casio Tone 602 which I will show you now. There you go, that's the Casio Tone 602. Now the 602 is from about 1980 and it's got a really dodgy, horrible drum machine on. So I wanted to use that. So what I did was I did one channel because it was in mono. So I did the left channel like this. As you can hear, that sounds pretty dodgy. I put it through quite a lot of chorus and effects to make it sound a little bit more weird. And because it was mono, I decided to run it through a second channel. The problem I have is, of course, there's no way of syncing it up. So I literally had to do trial and error to get the beat at more or less the right. I didn't want it exactly on. If I got it slightly out, then you get a bit of a phasing effect. So I did a second channel of the same drum sound, but this time on the right hand side, and we ended up with a stereo which sounded a bit weird because it was phasing in and out because it was slightly out of time. I hope you can pick that up there, the sort of the slightly distorted phasing sound. So I got a nice little background for the song. The song itself, it kind of started out and ended up, I suppose, a little bit like a Gary Newman track. Obviously very keyboard influenced because I can't really do much on guitar. But there was a guest bass player as well, which I'll tell you about later on. Signals was one of those what I would class as an instant song, in the fact that I literally didn't have anything written before I started it, and I pressed record and played some synth lines as a basic thing over the drums, and those synth lines were more or less made up on the spot, and whatever I played for the next 2 or 3 minutes determined what the song would be. This was the basic synth pad that I put over the drums. So there we go, I went through that, just did a little descending chord sequence through that, and a little different thing for the chorus. Then I went back to the verse and that kind of thing. So I ended up with a song length synth piece, and then I had to build a song around it really. Right, then I started the process of adding different synth lines to beef things up. So that was a chorus hook which I added. That kind of got buried in the mix. You can't really hear it in the finished mix, or at least I can't. I've forgotten about it. But that's one line I put in. Then I added some piano to the chorus just to beef it up a little bit. So there we go. That was some piano. So things were coming together. It was shaping up quite nicely. Then we came to the middle 8 and I added some strings. very phasey strings. Now, one common trick that people do, and I use it quite often, when going into the second verse of a song, is you usually add something extra that wasn't there in the first verse, just to maintain interest. And this was no exception. On the second verse of this, I added what I've called a pulse, which was a sort of a pulsing synth. I'll play that. It's coming in now. It's a very spacey, ethereal sort of pulsing effect. Now the thing is, I don't use computers for making the music. A lot of people have these kind of synth lines programmed in to actually go with the beat automatically without even trying, and I don't do that, unfortunately, as a rule. So that pulse was actually had nothing to do with the speed of the song, and I had to press it to play to sync in with the track exactly. And I actually don't get it right, it's slightly out on some of them, but it took about 40 or 50 goes to get it to actually be in time, because I had to change the tempo of this pulse on the keyboard and then try and time it with the track, a bit like the drum machine I did at the start. So that was a nightmare, but we got there in the end and it was worth it. I also added some high strings a bit later on. That was basically to beef the sound up. On track 24 there's something called bells, which again I think got lost in the mix. This is what they sound like. I think they're there in the mix, but that's something I added just again to beef the chorus up. Quite often you add quite a few of these little bits and bobs round about the track, and the overall effect is to just maintain interest if you've got these different sounds coming in and out. One of the final things I added on the music side was a bass guitar. Now I can play a bit of bass guitar, but I'm not brilliant, and I took the opportunity on this occasion to ask a friend of mine called Anthony Michael Dorgan, and he added some bass guitar for me, and this is what it sounds like. So, you know, fairly straightforward lines, just following the chords, but it was nice to have somebody else on the track. But that was more or less the music sorted out. So let's have a look at the vocals. Now, the vocal to start with was just going to be a vocoder singing, going through a vocoder with just one note, and this is what it sounds like. So there we go. The whole song was going to be like that, and quite late in the mix, that was the way it was going to be. And then I got cold feet. I don't know but so I added the verse melody, which sounds like this, which played what I was going to sing. And then in the end, I reduced the vocoder thing to a backing and actually sang the melody. The vocoder effect was made by a piece of kit I've got here called a VoiceWorks Plus by TC Helicon. That's it there, TC Helicon VoiceWorks Plus, that thing with the green window in. So I sang through that and got this Dalek-y type vocoder effect, and then I added proper vocals.
The problems are distorted in this cruel game. I would like to offer.
So that went over the vocoder and I mixed that in. So on the chorus, I double tracked the vocal. On the verse it was single track. On the chorus I double tracked it with the vocoder as well. And I also, which is another trick I do all the time, is put an octave lower vocal in as well. So this is how the chorus sounded.
I present an overflowing cup.
That's the low vocal, obviously.
My wires all tangled up, but my signals are important. Hear them now.
So I added double tracked over the top, so that was 3 voices plus the 2 vocoder. So there's 5 voices altogether on the song. The only other thing I haven't mentioned is the synth solo. Now the synth solo I was very happy with. Got a great full sound on it, and this is what it sounded like. Now it sounds very much like a guitar. That was obviously very intentional. Can't play a guitar as well as that, so I did it on the keyboards, and that turned out pretty well. The only thing about the solo that I wasn't sure about was the end bit. I don't think the melody came through strongly. That bit there. So I actually overdubbed some piano to track it. Here it is. So I tracked it with piano just to beef the sound up at the end of the solo. The only other thing I want to mention is what I often call a happy accident. And this sometimes happens when you're trying to do something and trying to add something to the track, and it doesn't work out, and you end up just messing about on the piano or wherever it is. And then you listen back and think, actually, I could use that bit and keep it in. And it happened on this, because at the end of the solo, I started vamping on the keyboard, the guitar sound that I had. And it wasn't intended to be on the track, but I liked it so much I left it in. This is a bit of it. See that sort of pulsing keyboard? That wasn't meant to be on the track, but I liked it so much I left it in. So that's more or less it, really. So let's hear the finished version.
I'd like to demonstrate my feelings to you now, to share my qualities if only you'd allow. The problems are distorted in this cruel game. I would like to offer love, why can't you do the same? I present an overflowing cup. I can hear my words all tangled up, but my signals are important. Hear them now. Every time I try to move, it's thrown back in my face. Why must I perpetuate this feeling of disgrace? Some time is passing now from winter to the spring. All I have to offer now
we go, that's Signals from my new album, Fast Cakes, Lifestory, which is out now on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff. Listen out for another one of these shortly.